Okay, everyone, welcome to the Elysian Kingdom, a land far away, long forgotten by modern men, and a land where Jess Bush can honestly say she was high as a kite and tried to act, but there we are. Welcome to... Yes, this is our review of Episode 8 of Strange New Worlds' first season, the Elysian Kingdom. Do you know what? This is my favourite duo now, is the Mbenga Hemmer combo, the Mhemmer. How would you say it?
Hembenga?
Mbenga.
Mbenga. That's what they do finger guns at each other. It's Mbenga time.
Yeah. Stop. So yes, like classic episodes like Bada Bing, The Royale, Shore Leave, Lonely Among Us. This is sort of like the typical, your fantasy away or the interaction with a nebula with its own kind of brain. This is a nice departure from normal and probably one of the funniest. Now, we've had two comedy episodes. We've had this and Smock and Mock.
Yeah, no, like 1/5 of our first season is comedy episodes. Sorry, BQ.
Oh no. Well, just like if you want to give it the Friends episode title, it's like the one where they go full TOS or the one where they go full Cupid or something like that. It's like
I was gonna say, when you were rattling off the classic episodes, Cupid is the one I think of most when I think of this episode.
Yeah.
There's so many to pull from.
I mean, it's hard not to go there because of the costuming choices and very similar overall aesthetic, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't do something completely different and for completely different reasons, which we'll get into. So, but I'm definitely glad, just from a thematic choice and just from a kind of palate cleanser kind of thing, that they have chosen to be as lighthearted and comedic as often as they have, while still packing a punch toward the end of the episode anyway. So I'm definitely glad at the balance that this season has had.
Yeah, well, they're very careful to make sure that it can be funny, it can be hijinks, but it's never like farcical, which is something I can sometimes say of some TOS episodes where it's like, yes, like some of the Mud episodes, for example, like it's a farce, and it's like that's fine, you can lean into that, but that makes it outright impossible to have an emotional weight to what you're doing. And Cupid also suffers from it. There's no emotional through line in Cupid. It's just fun, which is fine. But this manages to combine the humor with an actual point about one of our characters and have a lot of fun along the way. So I was quite happy with that. It's I appreciate that they went to the effort. Exactly. Well, because I was going to say it's not like when we go into the Big Goodbye with Picard, and the Big Goodbye and Dixon Hill essentially adds nothing to Picard's character other than, well, he likes trashy media, and that's something that you and I can empathize with. Yeah. I say that with a great amount of love for the noir genre. It's the pulps, that kind of thing. But it doesn't really add anything to his character. It doesn't elucidate anything other than he likes this, so it's something you can bond with him on. Whereas here, this is a holodeck program / a fantasy that Mbenga indulges in because of his daughter, and actually has a kind of thematic and character point, which I think is a nice little leg up.
Yeah, well, and it's just where they go with Dixon Hill later on kind of justifies it, but especially that first episode, it really just kind of stands alone as being something silly and something to... I mean, do we need to stop? Do I need to talk to you before we go? We're actually recording right now. Yeah, so...
it's fine. It's thematically appropriate. It's fine.
Yeah. It's a childhood fairy tale. We'll edit it out in post. Carry on.
Yeah, sure. No, but like when where they go with the Dixon Hill stuff later on, especially the stuff that it ends up in First Contact and things like that. But like you say, the very first episode, it really just kind of stands alone as just kind of a curiosity. It's like, oh, look what we can do with the holodeck. Isn't that fun? And Picard needs to blow off steam. Okay, and scene. It doesn't really have much purpose beyond that. But yeah, like you said, this one kind of can do both. It is a justifiable enough reason to be silly fantasy, while also telling a deeper, emotionally resonant story, which is everything that you want in something like this.
So there was there's the duality of this episode, really. There's the the book story, which was written, if any keen-eyed viewers notice, by Benny Russell. So he is real. He is Benny Russell is a real writer in the Star Trek universe. But yes, no, the duality of the character of the king in the story having to choose between the Mercury Stone and his his kingdom, and then in M'Benga's story of having to choose between his life or his daughter, essentially. It was just one or the other. So I kind of liked that duality between the two, sort of the story that was created and the story with the juxtaposition between the story that was created and the position he was left in.
Yeah, and it's also actually really thematically appropriate that the story was in universe written by Benny Russell, considering the fact that Benny Russell has a great amount to say about 50s sci-fi and about the Black American experience, but it also has a lot. It's also about Cisco and about how he's feeling in his life at that point in the Dominion War and how it's driving him down, and it's like he needs to find something to inspire him, and he finds that in Benny's awful traumatic story, but it does inspire him. Like, if he could keep going, I can keep going. And the duality of him experiencing that and drawing on it in his real life, and then using that as a nice little Easter egg in your story, which is kind of about the same thing. Like, the writers and the prop designers, they all know what they're doing. Everything is thematically linked, which I appreciate. It could have been just a nice little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but it actually had a point that was a Benny Russell story, as it were.
Well, yeah, and then it's just a nice little nod to just the idea of representation, and that you're a Black fantasy writer, ostensibly in the 50s. If they had the chance to write something, that could be something that they would write, and would be something that would just add just to the texture of the whole thing. So
because it is the kind of story he would write. Yeah,
but then writers do get especially in sort of the pulp sci-fi world, when you're writing for magazines, you get that you are writing this story articles. So you get the ones that are just like, here's the story, here's your assignment this week, go and write that. And I kind of, maybe that was one of those that you kind of went, yeah, I can do a whole book on this as well. You kind of probably maybe took it and spun it and went, yeah, this is going to be a whole thing. But it was a nice nod. I liked that sort of position to say, like, oh, Benny Russell was a successful writer.
We hope he had a happy ending, which is something I'm glad to hear for Benny.
Absolutely.
And it kind of ties into, you were talking about representation, and it's a twofold point of the costuming in this episode was the single best I have seen on a Star Trek production,
God, yes.
maybe ever.
Yes.
If anyone has nothing a chance, looked cheap.
If anyone has a chance, there's I can't find, I think it's on YouTube or Twitter or somewhere. It's posted by Star Trek, their account. There's a sort of mini documentary which was featured in the Ready Room just about the costuming for this episode. Literally, it was just about all the detail they put into 3D printing the designs, to the hand beading they did on Rukia's dress, the amount of the kind of fading they had to do and the materials they used. Is a lot of work was put into just for this one episode.
Yeah, and we were talking about this when we saw Rukia's princess gown and M'Benga's King Ridley design. They are not pure Western fantasy analogs. They are explicitly drawing on a more African sort of representation of royalty, it adds a nice flavor to it, and it's filtered through a cultural lens other than standard white default, which I really appreciate. So costuming was good in every respect on that.
Yeah,
way
I think even the costume designers did say that they wanted to sort of pay tribute to Bab's Nigerian heritage in the way that the costume was designed as well. So that's a nice touch, everything from the necklace and the jewelry to the sort of the designs and the colours.
Well, at the same time, you could still see elements that are pastiches of other things, which just kind of add texture to the whole thing. It's like, you've got a little bit of, the White Queen from Chronicles of Narnia.
Yes.
You've got swords from Lord of the Rings, and just little things that all kind of add together to make just this big fantasy quilt, which just works beautifully.
And then,
absolutely, and that's the thing that's the kind of story that Benny would have written. Benny would have written a story that was constrained by maybe 50s cultural mores where he can't go too far, but he would have probably insisted on, no, I'm going to make the king black. I'm going to go and do this because that's important to me, type thing. And it's very true to that lens. And I realize we keep on talking about Benny Russell, but that's because it's really kind of important to this, because it's also a story about Black fatherhood, which is something that Star Trek has delved into every now and then and does it really well. I feel when it does. Not that I can speak from experience, but
I can't say
none of us
anything
can.
about fatherhood, obviously.
But again, not just the costumes as well, but the sets. Like, they really dressed up the bridge. They really dressed up the corridors. Like, they, it wasn't just like, we're going to go to this set and we're going to have like whatever. When they went to a fantasy land in like the Next Generation, it's usually a set somewhere else with like some trees they planted at the edge of a car park or something like that. No, they just went, now we're just going to really decorate. Yeah, exactly. Someone's Ford Mondeo is parked in the other room that's using it as a stand for like the turrets. But no, they just dressed everything up, and it looked fantastic. I thought it looked really good. Like, I think it's a nice way of interpreting the kind of the delusion that the sentient consciousness was putting over to say, well, this is how you're going to live. I can't do too much. I can give you some laurels and some fake costumes, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it really works because it does. It stands in contrast because, like you say, any other Trek series, they would have used that as a reason to shoot on location. Because that way you can just get out from everything, you can do everything from scratch. But it's
Hi, Vasquez Rocks. Yes, it's me again. Yeah. You got any trees?
Move Raffy's trailer.
But yeah, so that it's another way that it kind of drinks from the same well, but does it in a way that's different and kind of unique to itself.
Yeah. I was looking to say, I've been told that this has a budget of around about $9 million per episode, which is pretty ridiculous.
Wow.
But here's the
lot
thing:
these days. What was like Lost was like one of the major TV shows that had big budgets per episode. Wasn't that something like 15 million for its first or something like that?
I remember the 2005 series of Doctor Who when it relaunched was £1 million an episode. So that was considered quite a bit at the time.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Is you see that money. It is incredibly well spent.
God, yes.
And especially knowing what I know about next week's episode, where they are reusing these sets, reused again, they are I'm not saying anything. They have gotten so much of their money's worth out of this set in the first season alone. Like, I think of the Enterprise D or Voyager, I don't think they got as much use out of their set in their first year of filming as Strange New Worlds has gotten out of the same. We've seen the same quarters redone as Una's quarters. We've seen Lan's quarters. We've seen Mbenga's. Almost everyone we've seen it redressed in a completely different way. We've seen sickbay done in 3 different ways now. Everything has been completely redone, and it's like you don't notice it all that often because they are smart about reusing different camera angles and about redressing everything so it looks completely different, so it sells it, even though that's a really good cost-cutting measure if you can just use the exact same 3 sets that you have standing and just film them from different places, and it's a completely different part of the Enterprise, and it works. I don't ever think it's a set.
We've only just seen the Jeffries tubes for the first time like 1 episode ago, and now we've already seen it redressed as
but don't they look
different
good
thing.
That's a good looking.
Yeah.
That is like a proper. You can say what you want about the bridge of the Enterprise.
Love
like,
a ship with a good Jeffries tube.
Yes, but no. But I mean, you can say what they want about like the bridge. Like, they've modernised it and they've taken it to step far. And some people like it, some people don't. But the Jeffries tube is like, that is a good modernisation of that classic, iconic TOS like style design. And apart from maybe the running lights going up the side for style, but.
Also, I would like to have lighting in my tube. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to see where I'm going, but just the colors, the primary colors in that thing, because like the TNG style Jeffries tubes, it's all gray and it's just very dank but so this is
gotta have some dank.
Yeah, I'll find Chapel for that.
It's interesting you bring up the TNG Jeffries tube, because I look at how they're using these sets and how they're using the Jeffries tube specifically, and I always think of the exact same Jeffries tube set where it's like 1 ladder up, 1 ladder down, that thing, and then you look down that end, and it goes for about 1 meter. And then there's a really shitty perspective picture, which never looks right on any TV released after the year 2000. And DS9 had it as well with some of the corridors where you look at that's a fake corridor. I don't even have to look too closely to see. Whereas Strange New Worlds, it's a combination of using their budget well, using their camera angles well, but also just having the money so that you don't see seams like that. I'm sure there are some people with like more eagle eyes who have noticed production
Oh, yeah.
mistakes here and there, but like
Yeah,
so
I mean,
far it's been immaculate looking.
once you know what the AR wall is, you see it everywhere. Like you can't
Oh,
ignore
yeah.
it. Like it's one that is the matte painting of the 21st century, really, isn't it? But it works.
Yeah.
Let's go on to a new segment. Let's start this every week, but this is Pike's Hair Watch. We need to address the various styles of Pike's Peak and how elevated it was, and also how there seems to be a bit of competition coming. I think Ortegas is definitely rivaling Pike's Peak and having some sort of hair off this episode. So when he went flat, she made up for it a little bit.
Well, I told you guys. Last episode when his hair got all mussed up by the space pirates, that it was going to come back with a vengeance. And that thing was El Capitan, man. It was straight up. I mean, it was like 8 inches up off his head. That thing was resplendent. I guess, maybe because he knew it was falling right back down into the butt part again. But, that was peak.
I can't wait until season 3 when Ortegas is sporting an outright pompadour. I can't wait. I'm down for it, man. Speaking of Anson Mount and Pike, can we? Everyone here does so good. Everyone plays against or to type perfectly. But I think Anson Mount is probably the standout of just the comedic performances.
So
Every time the camera is on him, he is just...
There's right. Okay.
It's 160 billion%. Is how much he's emoting.
There's a scene when Benga just leaves the bridge to head down, and then him and Ortegas, he speaks no words. He just looks at it, kind of goes, and then rolls his eyes, and I was just like, like he probably wasn't even like this. The cameras were like just kept rolling, and then someone had said cut, and he's just like, I'm just gonna make some shitty looks at you, and just went, yeah, that's so good. He's so good. Anson Mount is just the king of just like little micro reaction comedy, like hands down.
Well, and every line just had a little flip, a little twist, a little just something to reinforce that this is just a sniveling little toady for the entire episode, and it just built on itself because obviously that's where the character arc ended up going. But so yeah,
I have to imagine that when they were talking to Anson about doing this, they were like, okay, so we're thinking, this is the kind of character you're playing. He's like a sniveling courtier. He's like always trying to get in good graces, and he's like, so what if I when I slap my hand, I go, ow, as if I hurt myself because I'm so effete, and they're like, I mean, yeah, sure, you can do that, and he's like, and what if when I'm in the cell, I just press my face up against it and I start screaming about how the walls are closing in, and like, okay, and I imagine he must have kept on pushing. I'm even more than with Spock and Mock. I am very curious to know how much, if any, of this was ad-libbed. Because if it's ad-libbing, then these people are ridiculously talented in the comedic scene.
Got to be a lot of it. And I think like the whole Pike Ortegas sort of little quibbling thing was a lot of fun. You don't, other than sort of Pike being the commander and sort of, they have a little rapport, but them having sort of like the antagonistic rapport was also fun.
Oh sure, yeah.
Yeah, no, you get a nice little flip on there, sort of like more. I would guess this sort of like mentor-mentee like relationship in sort of the normal universe. I have heard some people say that this didn't land for them because they don't feel like they've had enough time to learn the characters. Now, obviously, with Pike especially, you have the background of him having been in 13 episodes of Discovery and, the Menagerie and The Cage, for example, as characterization. But I personally felt like, even though I've only known some of these characters from, like 7 episodes, I felt like I had enough time to establish context that seeing them in this characterization was... Because you need the contrast, right?
Yeah,
in order for
definitely.
the comedy and the humor and the farcical element to kind of play through. And I felt like it played all right.
Yeah,
So,
and I think the whole chessboard, like once you make the choice to make Lon the princess, the damsel in distress kind of character, someone else has to go in her place to be the hard ass.
Oh yes.
And so Ortegas, and then later on Una kind of.
I thought you were going to say our favorite red shirt ensign now coming back, Mitchell. Really chewing some scenery in her moment.
Well, yeah, there is that too. Yeah, sure. But I just mean that for Ortegas to come into that role, it's mostly because that would have been the most natural spot for Lon's character as we understood it up to this point.
Yeah, they've been very careful about not falling into the most obvious thing. They're making sure that people get to play against type and play around with their roles, so that Una gets to play someone who is a bit more flamboyant, a little bit gay. I guess that was the implication of what was going on with.
I didn't think there was a little bit about it. That was very obvious.
Yeah. I think Melissa Navia did go on Twitter and no, it was gay. Which well done. I appreciate you. Like,
listen, what happens in the Elysian Kingdom stays in the Elysian Kingdom. Like.
Yeah, I had to give the Nebula entity props. Like, it did a very good job of cleaning up because if anyone did anything they regretted or got hit with an arrow, clearly they had suffered no ill effects because no one noticed really.
Head
They were
chopped
like,
off
I
by
lost my
Ortegas.
house.
No, no worry about it. Luckily, she didn't kill him. I was actually acutely watching out. Is she actually going to stab someone? This is going to be a problem that's going to come about in season's time. But no, they tied it all up
to
with
the
a
point
little
that
bow.
even the head wound that she got at the beginning of the episode, it never
Completely healed.
comes
Yeah.
back. Yeah.
So listen, if you had the dress that Christina Chong was wearing, you would literally just twirl everywhere, because I think for every scene I wasn't even looking at Christina Chong, it was just the dress. Like, they even made me laugh when she walked into a scene, the dress was in it first. like and then you look up and go, oh yeah, it's her. Just twirling. But she did a really good job, like you say, complete contrast, but she did a great job of playing sort of like a spoiled little socialite. She was very much that. We've got to do this,
Well, I think that's also the advantage
Heed
you
me.
have of using an actual Brit in that role, someone that can understand the subtlety and not just do a pastiche. That you can actually
She does the accent perfectly.
Yeah, it's like me being the American talking to the two Brits, telling you how to be British.
No, it's absolutely right. Like, there is a degree of pantomime in all of this, which I really appreciate, because it's a really strong British tradition of overacting and. Oh, but it could be so much fun. It's so camp.
They're not. But this is fun.
When it's done well, okay, it's fine. And you know what? Speaking of camp, something I appreciate, because there's a lot of influences going in on this, but something that I appreciate, especially as I sort of saw groups of 4 in various different dresses in different party roles. I was like, this is a bit of a D&D campaign thrown large, isn't it?
Oh my god. Oh, now I know what I'm running for my next Star Trek Adventures campaign.
And it even has Mbenga metagaming with his knowledge of Castor and Pollux' relationship, going, I should know that at this point, but I've run this adventure before, so I know that that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, so and you've got your rogue, your cleric, your warrior.
Oh my god, I can't believe I didn't even notice that.
Yeah,
no, I think there's totally a degree of like, I feel like it's a little bit more subtle, but like a degree of sort of like fan, what would the word be? Like transformational works, as it were, like tabletop, and also to a degree fan fiction, because it becomes part of the plot that Saradia and Zamira shouldn't know each other, but Rukia, as all kids do, has rewritten the story so that her favorite characters are hanging out and being buddies together.
He's written some very inappropriate shipping novels. Is that what you're saying?
They held hands. Don't worry about it.
They're going up into that dusty corner of the DM's notes. So it's like, no, I don't want you to go. I don't want you to go. And then you just have to start freewheeling it from there.
So you run into a wizard. His name is. Looks at my book of Greek mythology. Castor and Pollux. There we go.
So speaking of, we'll start with Pollux. Like, a lot of people have got the hots for Ethan Peck as it is, and they just escalated that up to about another 10 notches there, with the roguish hair and the giant star and like his almost smirky. I think you commented, Stars, and you said, yeah, he's just stepped out of Merlin, hasn't he?
Yeah, BBC's Merlin, like just mugging for the camera, basically, which is not something an actor for Spock often gets to do. Like, Zachary Quinto, all the most he got to do was scream and occasionally make a funny joke. Leonard Nimoy basically embodied the entire character, and I actually was quite. Well, there was also Voyage Home. He got to step out of the role a little bit and have a bit more fun with it.
I will give Leonard Nimoy. He had the Paradise Syndrome where he got shot by the spores and he had to get crazy. So he had his moments.
Yeah, but in terms of stepping outside of that character, I think Ethan Peck in this one season has been given almost more opportunities than most of the other actors in terms of human Spock in Mock, and then playing Spock as T'Pring, and now the wizard, and he's basically a Lord of the Rings Grima Wormtongue character, which is like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, Celia Gooding as the White Queen, like really, she's just like, you could just have it up. She's like, yes, I can, and she's like being very much determined.
Oh yeah, she's full Maleficent. Yeah.
I mean, she's even got like the bugle witch fingers. That,
my pretty.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I didn't expect for this episode, because I thought we were just going to follow Mbenga around, but there were scenes happening outside of like Mbenga's viewpoint. So like they were having scenes with just the evil characters, Pollux and the Queen Neff, I think it was her name, sort of just doing real pointless scheming, just to kind of hit the ham home, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, because I think that's part of the thing is that Hema initially thinks, oh, it's drawing out of your mind because you know what it's talking about, and then he goes, oh no, wait, it's Rukia, and of course the audience sees it because Rukia is also seeing that scene as well because she's playing out the story for her own benefit, and then she even says to Mbenga at the end, oh, you did so well, like she was having fun, she didn't understand that people were. That Mbenga was like, hey, this isn't great. People are getting kind of hurt here.
We need to talk about boundaries.
You're WandaVisioning the crew. Stop it.
Oh, shit, it was WandaVision, wasn't it?
Oh, no.
Oh, shit, we're in trouble now. Dr. Mbenga and the Multiverse of Madness. Oh, no.
Just pulling everything in this episode.
So, can we talk about Mbenga's poor safety habits? Like, he said... I mean, it was great. It worked for him because it kept him immune from the cloud creature. But him starting to I'm going to mix these chemicals and not wear any safety gear. And oh shit! Oh no! I'm now high. And it was a good point of the episode where we didn't I was trying to work out whether he was just high as a kite imagining all this, or whether this was some other deception. I think it was until they started explaining about the nebula that we realized. Oh no! Until we saw Hema. When we saw Hema, and I was realized, oh okay, no, this is actually happening.
Well, and I think it's very intentionally set up that way. That way you can kind of have your own pet theory on what's happening as it's going on, and it's not blatantly obvious that that's what the reason is. But I didn't get the sense, and maybe it is explained, that chemical is what prevents him from...
I also didn't get that impression.
I assumed that because otherwise, why else would they do it? Why else was that?
Because Rukia wants to play with her dad.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
that's what I assumed it was.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I assumed it was too.
Because it's no fun if he's not aware of what's going on and can't play with her.
What was the point in the chemical bit then? Like he just sort of,
purely as a red herring, so that you think it's a gas-induced hallucination.
I thought it was because of the gas. Like they were the only two immune because he had the gas, which did something to his brain that made the can get to it, and then Pema obviously because he's an amazing telepath.
Well, they leave it ambiguous. Like they never explicitly say, but that's how I read it. Like they leave it ambiguous enough that you, however you like to read it, you can read it how you like it. But speaking of foreshadowing, I do actually have to bring up a point that I think is one of the few things I have against this episode. So earlier on in the season, my least favorite episode, let suffering lift us up where I cannot reach, whatever. Episode 6. A bummer of an episode, and I think we all sort of had the general kind of perspective of, this is kind of a one-off. It doesn't really affect anything in the grand plot, but at least Mbenga got a bit of progress toward his thing with his daughter, right?
Yeah.
Now, it really sucks that as of this episode, that is now completely defunct, and that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It might as well have not happened.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit happier with it because I realized that this effectively flips what happens with the first servant completely on its head. Because instead of a planet sacrificing a child for their happiness and refusing to look for other ways of getting around it, Mbenga sacrifices his happiness for his child's life. And that's why the thematic flip there, I think, helps. but it does still suck that that episode now has no bearing on the season's plot, really.
I mean, if you didn't have a reason to skip that episode on a re-binge of this season before, now there really is nothing there for you.
I am kind of annoyed that they left that trail with the doctor, the father of the first servant, who gave all the information and said, well, maybe I can help you and give you some of my research to help Rukia, and now they're just kind of going, oh yeah, didn't need that. So that rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. It's just like, you're setting up these serialized points, but I suppose this goes back to the problem that TNG had, and Voyager and things like that, where they would have individual writers that writing each episode, and maybe not. It sounds like there's not as much cross collaboration, which is fine. You have but if you're going to have your serialized elements like that in there, maybe get them to be a bit more cohesive. Otherwise, don't do it.
It's like since there's so few intentional through lines through an entire season, it's like to get one kind of wrong or have it be a total dead end. That does seem like there needs to be a little bit more communication to make that flow. I mean, I can understand, and sometimes you can just have big intentional red herrings like that. It's like, okay, this is how you think this is going to be resolved, and it's totally not going to be resolved that way. So you can make that choice, and then maybe they did do that. That was the goal all along. But it does feel a little unsatisfying. Again, just coming from the biggest bummer episode of the season, but at least having that as something to hang on to, and now you can't even hold on to that. So.
Yeah, because like you could essentially go from Ghosts of Illyria straight to this episode, and you would have lost very. What you like, I do think that thematically having the perspective flip on the civilization's choice versus Mbenga's choice is worthwhile. Like I think that's a nice thing to have, but I don't think in the end that it was like quite the right choice. I would be curious to know if maybe that research is going to come back in another different way, like. Maybe he'll come up with a cure, like for something else as a result of that research. Maybe that will be where he puts some of his newfound energy and time into, and they develop it that way. So I'm willing to give these writers the benefit of the doubt that even if either this is like a dropped, like they dropped a plot thread and it was a bit of a mistake, or maybe we're just not going to see it come back for a little while. Either way, it's like it's only a small thing that affects my. It's literally a case of. On its own, it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the episode, but it does affect my enjoyment of the series or the season rather.
Yeah, I think like if we're going to go for niggling parts, and mine is sort of related to that. It is the whole Rukia plot line is sort of like they brought her in, they established the rules, and then just she went off to her home planet. It kind of just disappeared off into ether with this celestial being, and it was very...
She went back to his home world.
Yeah, and it felt a bit rushed to kind of... Like, I understand there was a time limit on her health, and maybe keeping her in the buffer is not a great long-term solution, but to suddenly just... It was very sudden. It's like he found her in the quarters... And then all of a sudden she's going off with an alien being into space. Like even Wesley got a whole episode of like him regretting being in Starfleet before he went jetting off with some interdimensional traveler. But it just seemed to be like, and she's too young. Like she is too young.
But that episode sucked.
My problem is she is she's too young to make that decision. In my head, like it seems like this is something that maybe she's if you look at it from the outside, like, oh, hang on, she's been talking to this extra dimensional being and now been influenced by her to sort of jet off. Although it can save her life, it doesn't. Something about that just rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. That maybe.
I mean, if you want to put it a little more plainly, if you remove the entire Rukia plot line from this season, what really changed about the story?
You would lose pretty much most of Mbenga's character arc.
Yeah, you would. How it affects him, yes, but other than that, it's like what has it really accomplished in terms of? I mean, other than giving them.
I would say that the whole giving Mbenga some characterization is the point. Like that is it is not providing anything to the scope of Strange New Worlds other than giving Mbenga more things to work with, and God bless Babs, he acts his heart out for it. He does some good work there.
No one can say anything bad about his performance. He knocked out the park here. I kind of see the point of what you're saying here, but I have to flip it on its head and I ask, well, by the same token, what is the point of Pike's existential angst about his future then? Because that doesn't actually add anything to the
Well, we don't
overall
know yet.
plot arc.
We don't
Well,
know.
it's almost as if we don't know where this will go, because I
Yeah.
believe they did state in the Ready Room that there is a reason why his wife and Rukia's mother is no longer with them, and it may or may not have something to do with the Klingons. In which case, all of this season 1 arc suddenly has everything to do with setting up a potential personal grudge for your great compassionate physician character to have in the next season, in which case suddenly it does have a purpose.
Okay.
And it's because with season 1 being so heavily episodic, I think it leans more like 75% episodic, maybe 20-25% serialized at this point.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have an overarching plot point. Like it's just the adventures of the USS Enterprise. It is way more like TOS in that respect.
Yeah.
So sort of like to me, asking, well, what's the point of Mbenga's storyline? Well, what was the point of Edith Keeler dying in TOS? It's not. It doesn't add anything to the greater scope about the Federation. It's about the impact it has on Kirk, on a character that we like, and I like Mbenga. I think he's a cool character. So I kind of have to put it in that sort of.
Yeah, I just think the whole.
I wasn't even.
Yeah, come on.
It's not really what I felt about it, but I just felt, well, let's just take it to its logical extension if you want to go in that direction. So,
No, that's just, it's a fair sort of like conversation to have.
I think my whole thing with the Rukia thing is it was too quick. Like, I know we're trying to do episodic and they're trying to sort of slim down the serialized stuff because that's where they're putting Discovery, but I don't know, maybe I would have just liked a little bit more time to explore this dynamic between the creature and like the Nebula creature and his daughter a little bit more, because that's a hell of a toll. As someone with children, if someone said your child is dying but they're going to take them away, but they've come back and said they're happy, so it's all fine, I'd have been like, no, that's not good enough. Like, this is a huge toll on, that's my child. Like, that, I feel like it's all going to be hand waved in a way that we don't like about TNG. Like in those, Voyager especially, with the things they hand wave away and go, we're not going to come back to. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So that actually brings me on to I have a note here, and it just says, as fathers, what would you have done?
Oh boy.
Because I really wanted Big to be present for this, because both of you have like multiple children, right?
Yeah.
And in the end,
in this episode.
Yes, we have, and they are very, very adorable. And if you were in the same situation and you were asked by an entity which is, characterized by everyone around you as benevolent, lonely, incredibly powerful, and they asked you, "Hey, what do you want to do here? I'm giving you the choice."
Yeah, I would want that. I would want to spend more time with the being and just say, like, we need to talk this out a bit more than you just saying you're going to whisk them away. And because whether they like from Mbenga's perspective, like, okay, Rukia came back and said, "Oh, I'll see you again sometime. Look, I'm an adult daughter," but she died. Like, he doesn't know when he's gonna see her. She's gone. Like, and the same thing would happen if she died of the disease. Like, in my head, I'd be like, I'm not seeing my child again. Like, that in a way is scary. Like, I know there is the promise of maybe you'll see them. We don't know when, we don't know where, but it's not enough. And like, she even says to him at the end of the episode, "Go be happy and live your life." And that says even more finality to it. Like, just forget about me. And that's horrible to me because I don't want to forget about my children. Like, I want to embrace and remember them for what they are. So haven't been able to say like, "Oh, you're just going to go off and we're not going to spend," like, you're an immortal god, pop in for a cup of tea like every weekend or something. Would that be too much to ask? Like, prove to me you're still alive and happy rather than just go off. Like, I feel like either way, if it's just gone off and maybe we'll see each other, it's like, they might as well be dead, and that's horrid to me.
Well, I do have to point out that Nebula is a static point. They can come back anytime.
True.
There's nothing that says that that's not on the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first duty of a parent is to the happiness and health and safety of your children. What I have done as Dr. Mbenga is condemned my child to be a prisoner of a transporter buffer until I can figure out a cure that I may never figure out. What's being presented to me right now is ensuring my child's survival. And not only for now and through my lifetime, presumably for eternity. the creature says she will never know death. What more can you give to one of your children than immortality? I mean, it ceases to be about me and about my ability to see my child, to give them a gift like that. Especially if, I mean, yes, she's probably too young to really
to give informed consent,
of that decision, but for her part, she says, yes, I want to do this. Then who am I to take that away from her and shove her back in a transporter buffer for indefinite amount of time? Well, and actually it's becoming a very definite amount of time, because he's saying at the outset of the episode, time is running
months
out.
have become weeks have become hours. He is running out of time.
Yes, Lieutenant Savick, if you go by the book, the hours like days become hours. So who am I to deny her that? So I feel like, yes, it is presented as a choice, but in the end, I don't think it's any choice at all. You make the choice that allows her to survive.
Man, you win father of this stream, definitely. I'm so selfish. I just want to see my kids.
Oh, that's the thing. It is a legitimate, like, a heart-rending choice, because he does have to make that choice, and he can't account for what's going to happen in the future to him. He can't promise that he'll ever be back, because maybe he'll die the next day, you know. And it's also a case of he has to deal with the knowledge that he now is in her position at the beginning of the episode from her perspective. Instead of her living in his life as, you know, momentary blips across, like, you know, like hours and weeks and months, now he exists as a blip when she was younger, and now as an adult, and we don't even know how much longer it will be, and in her perception of time till the next time. So in reality, it's like, yeah, it sucks that you've lost all this time together, but is that any worse than the certainty of losing her altogether?
Yeah.
Deep stuff. There's no real.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's a good thing.
I hadn't thought of it, because it's like you're pointing out all of these inversions of situations and stuff, and I guess that's something that maybe the writers have really keyed on as something that's fertile ground for storytelling, because I hadn't really thought of it that way. But that you're exactly right, that's what that is. It's an inversion of the situation and the relationship, because there's nothing that says that he can't take a shuttle back out there, you know, once a year or something, and it's like have, you know, tea with Rukia or whatever. So and there's nothing that says that necessarily, given we don't know the extent of the power of this entity, that she couldn't come back as a younger version of herself, or something that is easier for Mbega to relate to in that moment. We don't know. We may never know. We probably won't ever know. Because it to me, when she comes back as the older version of herself, that is the plot telling you, okay, this loop is closed. At least in terms of the arc of Rukia's health and so like that's like, we're leaving this here. We're not going to revisit that. Rukia as a character may come back in some other capacity, but it's going to be for some other reason. It's not going to be about this and about Mbenga's happiness or sadness or desperation to find a cure, because now that's not on his plate anymore. That's been taken out of his hands. So that's what that whole scene means to me.
Yeah, and it's also, this is the kind of plot that you guys mentioned that it does get wrapped up really quick, and it does. And I think that is partly a foible of the, we've got to get this done in 50 minutes or so less, you know? But it's also a case of, this is not a plot line that I think you can leave hanging for too long, because otherwise it makes Mbenga look like a monster. And they point that out in the episode where, you know, the entity initially mistakes his imprisoning of his daughter in that transport buffer as like almost some kind of punishment, like or a prison, rather than a measure meant to keep her safe. And it's one of those things where in Star Trek there are all these kind of things where you don't think about through the implications of an episode, and you think about it and go, actually, that's kind of fucked up. what happened there. In context, it probably seems better, but when you think about it logically, it's like, oh wait, that was a bad, fucked up thing to do.
Computer erased that entire personal log.
Well, you want to get more granular about it. It is kind of fucked up that Paris and Janeway leave their lizard babies to die on that planet. Really, when you think about it, completely coldly, logically.
No, it's fine.
And
they closed
for
that.
a character. But like that's the thing, like for a character like Mbenga, that kind of stain on his character would be impossible to remove. Like the idea that out of the context of the show, where your audience is talking about and going, I like the show, but that doctor's kind of fucked up what he did to his kid. Like that's a bad look. You know, you kind of gotta. That has a time limit before it gets too fucked up, and I feel like they realized that and were like, we have to resolve this as relatively quickly. And I feel like if they do come back to it, I'd appreciate it. But it is that sort of thing of, I feel like this is more set up for a wider thing for Mbenga's character because he is no longer in stasis. Like, while this plotline was in effect, he essentially couldn't do very much. He was shackled to sickbay.
Now he can do all
and they
the
kind of
fly fishing
comment
he
on
wants.
that. Exactly. he can go on away missions and be the coolest guy.
Yeah, I'd imagine a
like, they
complete
broke him-
personality shift now from Mbenga now. He's just going to come back and be like,
Single
hey
and ready
guys!
to mingle.
A wild and crazy guy.
All right, let's talk
I
about...
think it has
Go on.
long-term implications. Yeah.
Okay,
I was going to say it just has like nice long-term implications for his character, and I'm excited to see it because he is a talented actor and he does anguish and fatherhood and humor well. I want to see what more he is capable of, and now he is free to do that.
We want to see Party Mbenga.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about the high point, my personal high point of the episode, which was Hammy Hemmer. Just, do you know what? We haven't had Hemmer for so long, and this is the episode that just nails him down as one of my favourite characters this season. He was so good.
Yeah, so if you had to save all of your bullets by having him not appear in all these other episodes so that he could be here and have this moment, I guess in the end it's worth it.
I'm not a wizard.
Use your hammer responsibly. He is such a highlight in this. Like Bruce Herrick is like, I don't know what else he's done. I'm kind of tempted to look up what other work he's done because he does not just like the high comedic stuff. He also does like he sheds that gruff, I'm the biggest, coolest, smartest guy in the room act when it is required, and he sloughs it off so easily. He's like, no, I'm sorry, let me help. And it's like that's what kind of drives at the core of him. He is essentially a good person, and he is a good Starfleet officer, which is something I appreciate a lot about. They get at the core of what makes Starfleet people Starfleet is that they are fundamentally good people who can look at strange, weird space bullshit, immediately come up with a theory, and then go, you know what, I should probably rig up a communicator with some transport controls. That seems like it'd be handy.
So can I put it, my favourite moment is when they're trapped in the jail cell and he's doing his whole thing and he says, you might want to avert your eyes, and like says my blind you, and he goes, what about you? And he doesn't say, they don't explain, say, well, it's because I'm an Anar, I'm blind. He goes, because I'm a fucking wizard. I laugh my head off of that. It's just like, the sheer fucking hubris of Hemmer, I love it.
He knows how good he is.
And
it kind of brings me back to a point that we I think Otto brought up in episode 3 where like he says I am a genius, and it's like it's sort of like shorthand in that moment, and this is way more effective at selling you on that because there's just like, of course Hemmer is the kind of guy to just have a laser scalpel on him at any one time. Who knows when you might need it. And I think I have to start my petition for Hemmer being the one Star Trek character who is allowed to swear on the show. I don't feel like it's appropriate for anyone else, but
maybe
that moment when he's like, my wizardly powers of power, and then you can literally see him about to say the word shit. Like he deserves the ability to, just like how Bones in TOS. If any character on that show should be able to swear, it should be Bones. It should be Hemmer in the show.
Yeah. Well, and then of course the big moment at the end where it's like abracadabra and beams, just the hand movements and just the. Well,
even
and where
Benga stops him for a moment and goes, okay, he's like, shut up, I'm acting.
I'm into this.
Well, yeah, because he builds to it because he's pulling it out of his ass as he goes, but then it builds to this grand moment, and then he
I
beams
cheered
them
at that
away,
when he says abracadabra.
Yeah.
Hit the thing. I was just like, he like slowly unveils the communicator, and I'm just like, oh yeah.
He's got the showmanship down perfectly. Yeah.
because it's also it's the big exhale, because it's like it goes from all stakes to no stakes in a second, and all of your problems are solved, and now you can just get to the end of the.
I like science.
And it's such a Hemmer move as well, because he just goes, okay, this is he adapts to the fantasy trappings of the new Enterprise reasonably well. He's like, okay, so I'm a wizard now, that's fine. But then he immediately, just like how Mbenga was metagaming using the book's plot, he just starts metagaming using the technology around him. He's like, I don't have to deal with this magic bullshit. I'm just going to do what I always do. I'm going to fudge a solution and turn rocks into replicators. Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like, it speaks a lot to his character.
You've got a Boltzmann brain, I've got an Anar brain.
Exactly. Like he knows exactly what he's going to do, and he does it. He guess what? Maybe one of the best, already one of the best engineers in the Enterprise, and I don't give that praise out lightly, because that's a pretty hallowed haul right there.
Yeah. Well, and
we need more.
Well, like Scotty's skill is fixing stuff when it breaks. Hemmer's skill is knowing how things are going to break in advance and how to fix it. And those are different skill sets, and they're both equally useful. Yeah. So I can really appreciate that.
I hadn't even considered that. You know what? That's even really appropriate, considering he's a precog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. I also heard some people.
Why doesn't everybody have an Anar on their ship? Why wouldn't you want that?
I think we had a TNG episode called Measure of a Man about that. I heard some people complaining that, why isn't Spock affected? Did they forget that he's a telepath? And it's like, well, no, they do a nice job of underlining, I think I'm immune because of my telepathic abilities and my superior training. And it's been part of the canon for a while that Anar are just way stronger telepaths than Vulcans by a wide margin.
I mean, they
were able to do some goofy
telepathic thoughts across the galaxy to command those Romulan drones in Enterprise. So yeah,
exactly.
So it's like hear somebody knocking on the door and say, "No, we don't want that right now.
We don't want to talk about our Lord and Savior. Thank you,
our Lord and Savior Shran." So yes, we got to see the antenna move as well. The one time they went forward, they went back.
Yes.
It's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is part of the rig. I guess they just don't use it very often.
Maybe. Well, I mean, do you remember?
Was it a rig, or was it an effect?
In Enterprise, it was definitely a rig. Like it was remote control.
Yeah.
But I can remember the Anar episodes. Did the Anar have moving antennas?
I'm gonna have to go back and watch them now, because I don't remember whether or not they moved.
No, because if they stay still, fine. Maybe
Why? They're good episodes.
It's a good episode.
Cool.
I don't know.
I'll do that research. I will report back and let you know whether or not. Because I was wondering that. Do Anar just not move because their senses are already accounting for stuff? But I don't know. I'll have to look.
Or maybe they only use the antenna in like a telepathic kind of. It's not something that they don't. They're just
that's twitchy, like the blue skins.
Yeah.
Did Rin's? Oh no, Rin didn't have any
his was chopped off.
Yeah.
His were chopped off, so we don't know.
I'm going to keep on watching.
Shakar from the Mirror Universe episode in season 1 Discovery.
I don't remember.
No,
I honestly don't remember.
Okay, we'll have to go back and check this. We need antenna watch.
So I remember when we were talking about when they're in engineering, they talk about the Boltzmann brain, right? And it's a nice little bit of technobabble that is technically a real thing, but doesn't mean anything close to what they mean it to in this episode. It's basically, we need a scientific excuse for a Q-like entity, and this is what we're going with.
Which they actually explain it. They don't for the one in Lonely Among Us or Q at all, really, do they?
Yeah.
Like they
And it sort of made me appreciate that when you make it grounded more in real science, or at least like semi-real, like after this episode was done, I did Google what a Boltzmann brain was, and I guess I did become a little bit smarter by having watched Star Trek, because it made me want to go out and actually read a little bit about a philosophical experiment. I am now a little bit more.
Who didn't go and do a deep dive on Dyson spheres after the first time you watched Relics?
Yeah,
everybody did, because that's just a fascinating idea. It's wholly impractical. the engineering and construction that would be required.
No,
to
everyone knows it's
conceive
all
of
about
something.
Dyson swarms. Come on.
Yeah.
Spheres.
So, yeah,
That's so 20th century. We're all about drones now.
So yeah, it drives that. It can drive an interest in legitimate science if you choose to pursue
Yeah.
it. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's fun.
Okay, let's go on to rating. Stars, what are we giving this kind of rating?
I am gonna. Okay, yeah, here we go. Gentlemen, how many Boltzmann brains named Deborah out of 10 would you like to give this episode?
I'm torn because it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and it does everything well. But I do feel like Spock was a little more satisfying to me personally. So that being said, I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that.
Oh no. Well, no, because I gave Spock a 10. I gave Spock a 10.
Okay.
So
Comparing grades here.
Yeah, it's because I enjoyed the hell out of this episode, but it's I am having to compare these things to each other, and I think just because this is a little bit more of an aside, it doesn't have as much import to the breadth of the
wider
story.
fabric.
Yeah. So the way that Spock kind of ties so many things together into things that we know going forward, I think that means a little bit more. It's got a little more weight to it. So that's why I would give this a 9.
I think I'm at an 8, mainly because of the Rukia things, like the both the plotline where with the Doctor's sort of resources going nowhere, and also sort of how quickly it was handled, and how quick they are to sort of tie a bow and just sort of move away, and sort of like without the. And again, I know this isn't serialized. I know this is the imaginary friend, the Kestra Troy kind of ending where they'll do it and then just never refer to it again. Well, until we get to Nepenthe anyway. But and like I understand that they have to sort of tie these things up in an episodic television, but it's still one of those things that maybe if they were going to introduce it, maybe stuck to their guns a little bit on it. So everything else in the episode was amazing. I loved the sets. I loved Antimat's humor. I'm a huge Hemmer fan now. Ortega's sword fighting with Aragon's sword was just amazing. Everything was brilliant, but I feel like the overall plot parts of it just let me down a little bit. So I'll say an 8. 8 is great. 8 is an amazing episode by any standards. Like I will happily rewatch this again. But I would say I wouldn't quite elevate it up to near the Spock and Mock levels or even some of the other episodes.
I am going to give this one a 9.5 Boltzmann brains named Deborah out of 10 for this one because, the 0.5 because like I feel like the fact that it retroactively kind of damages Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach does hurt like the overall season a little bit. Like taken on its own, if that episode hadn't existed and we jumped straight to this and maybe had a Rukia scene somewhere else, I would have been probably a bit happier with it. I can't speak to I don't know. I feel like I have a pretty high, strong tolerance for any kind of pacing. Like I'm one of those people who like we found Discovery oddly paced. I found it fine. So maybe I just have a weird brain. So I feel like like that's kind of what hurts it most for me. So 9.5 out for me. So a little bit below Spock and Mock. I gave that a perfect 10, but it's still a really strong episode. And I think this is my 4th time watching it. The one that you and I just did. So, I put it on at work when I was doing a long form battery test, and I was like, this is a fun episode to just have on in the background. I can easily see myself rewatching this in the future.
Is it me? I just feel dirty giving anything a 10 out of 10. I feel like I've not. I don't know why. It just doesn't feel right. It can't be that good, surely.
Well, I mean, I think that the 10 out of 10 that I gave Spock and Mock, it only looks stronger in hindsight so far. Just because it did, that's where all the stars kind of aligned just for comedy with weight and depth and actual plot import. That's like that,
and the handling of characters with proper depth,
Yeah, it's just it hit everything, and so that's. I mean, I'll wait till we do the full season wrap up at the end, but so far I'm not changing that one iota.
Yeah, and we're still on course for this to be the best first season of any Star Trek. This is an incredible streak so far.
This is superb. without a doubt.
Mm.
On
And
that
I
note,
am
yeah.
optimistic for the next episode.
Can't wait for that. All right,
It's more my tone. I like the tone they're going for.
We will see you next time, guys. On that note, ta-ra.